everyone. So today we are going to try and go quickly through my most favorite sewing tools that I love and have to have in the sewing room, cannot live without, use them every single time I sew. Tools, okay? So number one, we're gonna talk about cutting our patterns. I always have my giant cutting mat, which I will put a link to the website down below where I get it. It's cuttingmats.net. Then I have my heat erasable pins I talked about in my last video. Super helpful. They only come off when you iron and they mark really well, and there's lots of different colors. And I recently worked with black fabric and I used the white and it worked really well. I don't really like using chalk for a lot of the reasons I talked about in my last video, but it just kind of pulls and doesn't stay as well. So I really like these. Both of these rotary cutters I can't live without. This is the one I use to cut on my fabric. It's LDH. It's gorgeously amazing. I don't even know why I said it like that, but it's just amazing. It cuts everything like butter. This is the one I use. It's just a cheaper one that I got at my local fabric store. I use it to cut out my patterns, okay? Got lots of replacement blades, cut out my patterns. I don't sit and cut them out with scissors anymore. It takes 4 times as long. And so I just put it on here, lay out my pattern, cut it out with my rotary cutter. But I never cut paper with this one because this is my nice set. So this water soluble marker I use a lot less now that I have these heat soluble pins, or heat erasable pins. But I do use it when I know I'm going to be ironing something a lot and I want to mark it and I want the mark to stay. I'll use this one, but I usually use the heat ones. Also, these heat erasable pins are from Madam Sew and they come with little refills, which is super nice. Next, okay, so whenever you are cutting out your pattern and your fabric, you probably need interfacing. I used to have 5,000 different interfacings for all the different kinds of projects, but now I just buy this woven Pellon Shape Flex interfacing. It's SF101, and it's all-purpose woven fusible interfacing. And so it's woven, so you have to cut it on grain, or sometimes I cut it on the cross grain. But I get it from either, I've gotten it from Amazon before, I've gotten it from fabric.com, I've gotten it from Joann's, whoever basically has it at the moment. And I get a lot of yardage at a time. It's 20 inches wide, and sometimes I'll get 20 yards, 10 yards, whatever. I wash it because I feel like interfacing does shrink. So I wash it, dry it, and then I put it back on the bolt. So that's what I do with that. Works very well. Next, another thing is if you want to interface just a zipper area, or you're needing to interface the shoulders on like a knit top or something like that, I pretty much use this Design Plus Bias Fusible tape for everything. It goes on super quick. Use the iron. You just kind of like pass the iron over it for a few seconds and then it's stuck on there. It stretches a little bit, but not a ton. So if you need a lot of stretch on the seam or the area that you're putting the interfacing, you might need to use interfacing that has stretch. Can't remember the name of it right now. But I use this for almost everything. And it even says neckline, hem edges, arm seat control, knit shoulder stay, control fraying fabric. So you can even use this for a hemline too. And I've used this for knit hemlines. If they're like really loose and I don't need them to stay, to be able to stretch, then I will use this. So that is all about cutting out. All right, so next up, we are going to talk about the sewing part. So one of my favorite things if you're turning loops is to use this loop turning tool. There are so many things out there that do this kind of thing. These are by far my favorite. They have 3 different sizes, and what you do is you take the purple part and you pass it into your loop. And so the loop has to have some kind of in or closed into it, otherwise you can't use the other tool. And then you take the other tool and you push it in to the closed end, and it starts folding over this tool, and you keep going, and then eventually the fabric is right side out on this, and then you pull this out. While we're talking about loop turning, let's see, I can't even see to put that in. I also use this little baby, this wooden thing. Even when I'm using the loop turning tools, I don't really like to use like this super skinny one to like poke the corners and things like that to really get it turned out well. I like to use this because it's more gentle. It's this wooden turning tool. And I use this to kind of poke it, if it can fit in there. I use this to kind of poke the edges out, especially for collars. And I find it doesn't poke through the fabric as easily as these pointy things will. So I use that. Seam ripper, of course. I have used so many different kinds of seam rippers. The little ones, I like the little ones. I don't like the ones that are like super big, that have a super big handle, but that's just my preference. So this is just a random, I don't even know where I got that seam ripper. Okay, now I have 1, 2, 3, and I wish I had a 4th, magnetic pin holders, I guess, or pin cushions. So I love the magnetic because, number 1, my little crazy children love them to death, but they will knock down my pins. And the dog, he's super giant. If he passes by the table and knocks down all my pins, they just go flying everywhere. And I just use this magnet to pick them up. And then the other thing is, I like to have one everywhere. I like to have one here when I'm cutting out fabric. I like to have one here whenever I'm sewing. And so, oops, sorry about that. When I'm sewing and I can take the pins out and put them there. And I like to have one here when I'm serging and I can put the pins there, so that I'm not searching for where my pin cushion is every time I'm taking pins out. And so it's way more convenient to have like several of them. The other thing is, I don't like it when they get too full, so I always put the full one on my table, and if I'm pinning gathers or whatever, it's a lot easier to see. This one's pretty full. It's a lot easier to take pins out and like not look and just let the magnet catch them when the pin cushion is not very full. So that's another tip. Next, whoop, get too excited. Invisible zipper foot. Okay. I have 2 issues. Number 1, I have a FAF, so I need like kind of special presser feet for my machine because it has IDT technology and it has a little hook thing on the back that kind of hooks on to the presser foot and helps it move the fabric on the top as well as the bottom. So it's kind of like a walking foot, and I've talked about this before. So I kind of need special feet. Some of them are still compatible with my machine, but I can't use the IDT technology. I just can't put that little hook on the back. But so I don't have a huge choice of presser feet unless I want to buy them specifically for the FAF machine, which the ones I found are pretty expensive. Or you can buy some that are compatible that are not made by FAF, but they still work with FAFs, and that's what this one is. But B, I'm also kind of lazy. So I would rather just do whatever I need to do with a regular presser foot, and I don't like to change it. I don't use a stitch in the ditch foot. I don't use any other kind of fancy feet. Now I will use a piping foot if I'm sewing with piping, and I haven't done that in a long time. I will definitely use this all the time. So this is a for sure requirement for me. So that's why I included it in this video. Obviously I also use a zipper foot. Most people do buttonhole foot, stuff like that. Those are kind of simple. But this is the only like specialized extra presser foot that I ordered. It's hard for me to talk today. So yeah, other than that, I don't really use anything else. Speaking of, I just talked about buttonholes. Speaking of buttonholes, I use this buttonhole cutter that I got from Amazon, fray check, and this little mat that you use with the buttonhole cutter. It's got like this little, gotta be careful because it's pretty sharp, flat little, you know, piece that can fit into the buttonhole, most buttonholes, unless it's super tiny, and you can just push it right down in there, wiggle it a little bit, and then your buttonhole has a clean edge and it's cut very nicely. I usually fray check it before I cut into it, and it keeps the fraying down. So these are like married to each other. I don't break them apart. And then the other thing is I haven't used this as much lately. I'm not sure if I'm just not putting buttons on as many things, or the patterns are telling me exactly how much to space the buttons apart. But this helps so much with button placement because it's super accurate. You can just pick your placement and you can line it up with all these little things. And if you need, let's say you need, there's 7 here, no 8 here. Let's say you need 8 buttons in this amount of space. Well, now they're perfectly spaced. Let's say you need 8 buttons in this amount of space from here to here. Well, now you have 8 that are also still perfectly placed. So it's pretty awesome. If you need more than 8 buttons, you can just place these, and then I just move this down and place the rest. But I have, like I said, I've been using patterns that are specifically telling me to space them, you know, 3 inches apart or 3.5 inches apart or whatever. So I just kind of follow that. I never, ever, 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 ever use the button placement like that's actually on the pattern, because I don't like to make those markings when I'm cutting out the pattern. I'm basically just too lazy to do that. So, and I'd rather see the pattern like put together in case things shift or move or whatever, to be able to, before I pick where my buttons go. So I will finish and be able to talk through this video eventually, because this is my last thing. So I have tried really cool, like hemming tools and gauges and like other things, like wooden ones and like super expensive ones. And I keep coming back to this little sewing gauge for everything. So it's basically pretty common. You can find it almost at any fabric store, and I just use it all the time. It has centimeters and inches, which is very useful for a lot of European patterns. And when I'm doing a hem, I just fold it down and I just place it on there and check that it's good. And I won't check my hem the whole way, but like, you know, you can kind of eyeball it when you've been sewing for a while. But I'll be like, that looks kind of fat. Let me just see if that's right. So I have 2 of these, and I keep like one by my ironing board and one over here. Use this all the time. So I don't think I could live without this. The other thing is I use this all the time, and I had another pair. I used to have one pair here and one pair next to the sewing machine, but my daughter stole a pair because her sewing machine is right there, because she sews down here with me now too. But I cannot live without my little scissors. I use them all the time. So they're basically stuck to my hip when I'm sewing. One thing I forgot to mention, I have this little tray of safety pins that I use for as well as my turning tool when I turn things. And I also forgot to mention this, when I cut out patterns, these are so important. This is for dramatic effect. I put them down on my pattern. I only have 4 of these. I have these little washers. They're not super heavy, but I can just put a couple on my pattern. I have seen people like glue a bunch of them together to make like a more useful pattern weight, and they like paint them or they tape them or something. But I hate crafting. I'm just gonna just be honest about that. I don't like arts and crafts. I don't like making tools. I don't like making things. I just want to sew. I don't want to take time to make stuff like that. And that's like putting it nicely. So I just use them separate. I'm like, it's fine. And if I need more, I'll be honest, I use whatever's around. I will use my cell phone. I use these things, you know, whatever. I just start grabbing things in the room. So So I hope this helped you guys. I hope you learned something. I've been sewing for a long time, and like 2 years, I guess, or two and a half or two. I'm gonna do a sewing, like how I started sewing video, and then I'll probably look that up and find out for sure. But I have been sewing for a while, and these kind of things I love to watch because there's always something that I haven't learned or something that I think is super cool that is new to me. So I hope you learned something new even if you've been sewing for a while, and I hope it made sense if you haven't been sewing for a while. And I will try to list as many things I can down below. Some of them are just bought at my local fabric store, and I don't have a link for it, but everything I have a link for I'll list down below. And if you like this video, just hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell so you can be notified when I have another video. Go ahead and press the like button because that will totally help other people find my video, which would be awesome. Leave me a comment below if you want to say hi or if you have any questions, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye! Did you see that? Did you see that? I stayed after I said bye, and I didn't get up so that people didn't see my butt.